Hi everyone, welcome to another episode of the Cheeky Natives. It's Letlhogonolo recording again from America, which unfortunately means that my beloved Alma is not able to join me on this episode. But nonetheless, we've come to create content that celebrates stories about Black people, for Black people, about Black people. And in doing so, I thought it was important to, somewhat steer away from, people who are writing and people who are writing in a sense of like creating works and books that we're supposed to read, but just create a space to celebrate people who are also creating stories about Black people in other means. As we've said earlier in the podcast, it's about literature primarily, but also reviewing and talking to people who are Black, celebrating Black stories. And today we have a wonderful guest. My beloved dear friend, Kleaver Cruz. Hi, Kleaver.
Hey.
How are you doing?
I'm great.
How are you enjoying your New York weather?
Though I was raised in this condition, these environments, I am not a fan.
I can understand that. Today is a bit warmer than it was yesterday.
Isn't that a relative thing?
I guess so. I think it's because of the sun.
That's true.
I was outside in the sun and I was like, oh wait, it's warmer. And I also walked quite a bit, so maybe that heated me up a bit.
The sun is deceptive.
So who's Kleaver Cruz?
Oh wow. I guess I have to say that I'm one of these kids from the Bronx, uptown. What up? I was born actually in Washington Heights, which is considered like the epicenter of Dominican migration outside of DR. It's where the most Dominicans are outside of the island. Anyways, I was born there, and then when I was a couple years old, like almost 3, my twin brother Walter, and the rest
Shout out to Walter.
Yeah, Walter. And the rest of my family, we moved to the Bronx. So I've been living there for most of my life in some form. What else? I mentioned that my family is Dominican.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And do you want to tell me about what that means, to be from DR?
What it means for me
Mm-hmm.
is that I come from multiple generations of women, Black women, that have migrated in some form between Dominican Republic and the U.S. And then my grandmother, Maria, she was the one who, planted a permanent stake in a way. Because her mother came and lived here, but she went back and forth a lot more. My grandma's the one who stayed, who anchored this segment of the Cruz family. And so then my mom was born, and then here came me and Walter. So yeah, we're from Washington Heights. We're Dominican. I claim Black proudly, and queerness, figuring out what that means too. What else? I like to say I'm creative.
Mm-hmm. And I know you've starting to do, I feel like, really important and beautiful work around the idea of Black joy. Before this podcast, I was thinking about like the poems that I've read. I've read a poem by Koleka Putuma who speaks about Black joy, right? And I particularly like the last line or the last stanza of her poem called Black Joy. She says, I write love poems too, but you only want to see my mouth torn open in protest, as if my mouth were a wound with pus and gangrene for joy. And that was so profound for me, right? Just the fact that the work that you're doing, we'll speak more about what it actually means to start the Black Joy Project, which is something that you've really anchored and started. But just the idea that when we talk about the Black experience, we don't talk about the joyful parts. How was your childhood like? Was your childhood in your opinion, in how you've started to understand what Black joy means? Was it joyful?
I think so. I think that when you grow up in a certain environment, and mostly everyone, if not everyone, is experiencing the same thing, that's normal. So I didn't have a sense of even though I didn't have money per se, Walter and I weren't the kids that wore Jordans or all the fresh stuff and all that, but we were good. We had clothes and all that. And I remember just having a lot of fun in the Heights in particular, block parties, hanging out with our extended family there. A lot of adventure. I feel like my brother and I had a lot of adventure with our god brothers, running around like, I guess this is all before the internet and everything, so we talked to each other and ran around and, like, got into a lot of mischief. We had the, like, nosy neighbors to avoid and all these different fun elements of being in community, really. I guess that's what brought me joy, is I felt like I was really a part of the village, looking back. There was a lot of people that cared about us, even though we were in precarious situations, even though, like, at a block party there was a shootout once, things like that. But yeah, I remember a lot of joy amidst, as always, like, some of the chaoticness of living in the hood and shit in New York.
And so, I mean, I just alluded to it earlier. You started a movement, you know, because these days that's what we call them, a movement called the Black Joy Project. Actually, if it's strong, let's claim it. You started a diasporic movement of Black Joy.
I'll take it.
What is the Black Joy Project?
The Black Joy Project, I guess I'll start by saying how it began, which was in 2015 was a particularly trying year. My family is small, my immediate family is small, and my Uncle Ali, today's his birthday, rest in power. He passed away from an asthma attack that year. And so that was in, like, February of that year. And I'm just gonna take a pause. But later in that year, I woke up feeling really sad, and I think it was being present to, one, like, grieving, like, that's a long process that doesn't end, and as much as I did really well to, like, choose joy in all these ways, I wasn't necessarily giving language, but whatever I thought was necessary to be healing, I think in that moment, that also being involved with activism in various ways in New York City and elsewhere, I was just present to a lot of death and pain, Black pain. And I think my spirit, my body, my mind in that moment, that morning was just like, full stop. There's actually no pushing past this right now. It was depressed. It was a type of depression. So anyways, I laid there, and then I started getting this, like, the way I described it was like this spiritual rush. I just began to, like, see all these images and sense this deep feeling of joy as a way to work through whatever I was experiencing, and that it wasn't new to me. There's actually things I had drawn on or experienced in the past. And so I decided to go on the internet, because it was 2015, and on Facebook, it was like a stream of consciousness. Honestly, I didn't, like, practice or draft what I was going to write. I just knew I had to post this picture of my mom from this art show that we had gone to earlier in that month, and then said the words along the lines of, like, let us bombard the internet with joy, that joy is another form of resistance, that we can hold the pain and the suffering and all of these things, and we can hold joy, that there's room for it, and that joy also offers a form of healing and community. And it was a call to action that if anybody else wanted to join me, they could do that too. And so what I told myself is that I would do that for 30 days. I didn't tell anyone. I just told myself. I was coming off this, like, self-love challenge. Shout out to my friend Akuya. What? And I was feeling kind of way because I didn't really complete it. So anyways, I was like, this is an opportunity to do another 30-day challenge. And so I did that. And so the next day was a picture of my cousin and so on. And then after a couple of weeks, people started sending me messages. And I remember that one of the first ones was someone who I didn't know that well, sending me a message saying, like, hey, I had a really terrible nightmare, and seeing one of your pictures calmed me down enough to go to sleep. Or another friend, I was going to call her a comrade, but we're like family now. She reached out to me and was like, hey, I got through this whole week of organizing by seeing your images every day. Thank you. I needed that. And so then that's when I started thinking, this is a little bit bigger than me. So I called one of my best friends. Shout out to Sarita Gates. I'm going to give her a lot of shout outs.
That's good.
And she basically was like, what are you talking to me for? Like, go do that. And that's when I decided to hoard it. So, like, there's all these platforms that I've saved, but really it became an opportunity for me, I wanted to continue it visually. And so now what it is, to fast forward to your question, is that I think it's a number of things. One is it's a digital space for people who need some kind of reprieve and happen to have access to the internet and Instagram, who need a reprieve can see someone that looks like them. There's no sensation around this visual. There's no, like, auditioning for your blackness or humanity inside of it, that you can just see people be. and articulate what Black joy means to them. Because as a lover of words, I don't think we all ever experience words the same way. I always find it important to ask people how they understand what I'm saying or what I'm asking of them, without assuming that they understand what I understand. And so, yeah, so it's about people speaking in their own words, and sometimes in their own languages, if it's not English, to articulate what this means to them. I think it's also an imagining. I am someone who thinks about what happens after the revolution and not just the revolution or the fight towards it. And in that image, what I see are a lot of Black people that are healed and in community and full of joy, which means that we have to start doing that now. I think also it's a space that it's like a what's the word? Almost like an encyclopedia in a sense, because I believe that when you articulate your Black joy, what that means to you, or you hear someone else's, particularly if you're in community with them, that actually offers people another form of supporting you and yourself in that commitment to healing. It's also a real life thing. Like the Instagram account, it feels more like an archive or a record of the interaction I'm having like these in real life. And that's what's most important to me about the Black Joy Project, is the times I've met somebody on the street and we walked away smiling because we talked about Black joy, or speaking at a school or at some like place to present, and people walking away feeling affirmed that it's okay for them to experience joy, whatever it is. That it's the moments where people are experiencing community, that like if I set up a photo shoot and now people are talking to each other about Black joy and all these things, of how in real life, in 3D, especially as we're moving more and more and more towards this dependency on screens, of how are we actually being with each other. So I think it's that too. It's a lot of things, and it's a living thing too, so it changes forms.
So you speak a lot about healing, saying that you're more concerned about what happens after the revolution, because I guess part of the revolution is coming to a place of healing. But what does healing look like to you?
It's a good question. I think first it starts with yourself and being honest with where the pain is. I think it's being present to the pain without letting it consume you. Sort of like with sadness, that I believe it's not that you avoid sadness, it's that you experience it. But sometimes we like slip and like dive into it, like a spiral down into it, which there's various amounts of control that we have inside of that. But what I'm saying is, healing is being present to the things and the sources of your pain, and then figuring out what are the ways to reconcile with it. It's not going to go away. And most people are actually living with pain, and we get so comfortable inside that pain that we actually don't even know what life is like without it. There's no imagining of what else we can be or how we can be without that pain.
It's interesting because I think we've been conditioned to believe that pain is okay. Like I'm thinking about my own life right now, and just thinking about like the hardships that I've been through, and how like in some ways I've seeked out things that will pain me, because that is the only emotion, the only feeling that I can associate with being alive, right? But recently, and encountering you and having conversations with you, like I've seen the importance of like inhibiting and experiencing joy. And sometimes I haven't even recognized how healing those experiences of joy are, being in New York, you opening your space, you and your family has been joyful, but in ways that I wouldn't have conceived without feeling the actual feeling. And I guess my other question would be, what is the work of healing for you? Because I mean, it looks different for everyone, but what is the work of healing for you?
Yeah, for me it's a few ways. One was, shout out to having health insurance in this forsaken land of a lot of things. Anyways, when I had health insurance, I saw a therapist for like, I want to say 2 years. And that was really helpful because I got really blessed with a therapist who was also Black and queer. And there was a level of explaining I didn't have to do, which is really awesome. So it looked like that. It looked like, last year in particular, making a list of all the men in my life, particularly like romantic partners, that I felt I needed to reconcile with, that was actually carrying something that was incomplete, that I didn't want to carry anymore. It looked like writing to myself and truths, writing a piece about like being suicidal and all these experiences of unhappiness, because I'm someone that actually keeps things to myself. Because my superpower is listening. Someone was listening to other people, and sometimes that's actually a decoy from people actually asking me how I'm doing. The brain. So writing, having honest conversations with people, and consciously choosing joy. Like making those. I make these daily videos, almost daily, on Instagram for like 20 seconds. But as much as I'm speaking in the you form, the second person, I'm actually talking to myself too. Like today I need to choose joy, and that has to be a conscious thing. And that, for me, that does offer healing when I realize now, sometimes I have a choice, and I don't have to be in pain right now. But I do have to address whatever is causing the pain.
I mean, wow, these are such deep conversations about like just reimagining, right, and recreating the spaces of blackness, but in particular, black queerness, because these are intersecting identities, because not only are you black but you're also queer,
Right.
And you can't put your blackness apart from your queerness.
Right.
And have you found that in claiming these identities that you've become more joyful, like in understanding like the conditioning, rather the positionality of where you are, to be like, I'm black and I'm queer, and that's important?
That's a good question. Can you ask it in a different way?
So, I guess because of where we are, because of the oppressive systems that we live in, right, we are marginalized on all fronts. And this is essentially a double marginalization. And I guess the question is, in these oppressive systems, have you found that owning yourself has brought you joy?
Yes, absolutely. And I think that's interesting, particularly as someone now these days my presentation, like gender presentation and all those things, isn't always necessarily read as queer, which is interesting because that causes like we're gonna use inviting in, which I actually prefer, and y'all will hear in another episode. That it creates a type of inviting in sometimes that it just feels, it's interesting to like watch people, but I'm saying that to say I'm okay with that because that's disruptive, and it actually creates space for me to be there.
Yeah.
And other people like me to be there. So being more unapologetic about who I am, and that doesn't always mean like a outright or public declaration, but just standing deeply in who I am and what I stand for. Just speak with like deep conviction, and to move in the world that way. To be aware of when something is making me uncomfortable, what is my ability to do something about it. There's also a healing in like, not in like, but in being in community with people, which I think is really important, that the Black Joy Project has shown me a lot. There's something about when you're with a group of Black queer people, maybe just one other person, that there's something affirming when you can have honest conversations out of that. I think queerness, what I have found for myself and other people, is silencing. You have to do so much movement in the dark and in shadows, without conversations, without music, without certain books, all these different things. And so I think when you use your voice, when I use my voice, I have to speak in that way as much as possible, in a way that's not sensational, that is as regular as possible, because we're that. To me, this is normal.
Yeah.
I'm not auditioning for like fitting in or any of that. It's more of, this is how this shit is, and this is how I'm gonna be, and I'm okay with that.
Yeah. You speak a lot about, earlier and even now when you spoke about community. And I guess listeners may be wondering, and I'm wondering, right, obviously we're located in the US, like, is the Black Joy Project a national project? Is it an international project? Like, how can people plug in from around the world? How can people in South Africa or anywhere across the world plug into this Black Joy Project?
That's a great question. No, this is about Black people everywhere and everywhere. It's a global Blackness. In fact, some of my favorite interviews that have not yet gone public were conducted in Johannesburg. So the South Africans are a part of the project already. Yeah, this is about, like I was saying earlier, about an imagining. This is also an imagining of a Black diasporic unity, because I believe that our freedoms are tied, and that I'm not free until South Africans are free, until Brazilians are free, until all Black people are free. What that means also varies where we are, right? That, like, in Brazil, land is a really important key.
In South Africa, land is an important thing.
In South Africa, that land is an important thing. Colombia. There's a lot of different things that we're facing, but what I'm saying is that I believe that once we listen to each other in particular ways, that we actually can learn from each other. Because who knows? I mean, I may not know, but Brazilians might have a whole practice for land grabbing that South Africans need to understand and learn.
You know, they need to give us that land grabbing practice.
You know what I'm saying? So there's a way, that's part of being in community, is that the pictures are cool, that's fine, that's fun to look at, you could double tap all you want to, but it's more important of, like, how do you actually learn that story? That if you see a Black Brazilian, how are you being with their existence and their experience, and not just double tapping? And whatever the responsibilities that each of us have to take, because it's not going to be the same for all of us. But what I'm saying is that, for me, the Black Joy Project is an opportunity to see the world of Black people, and particularly giving the platform or the space to hear the ones or see the ones that we don't always get to see. Which, shout out to analytics and the modern world that we're in. For the Black Joy Project, that means Black women. That's the majority of the people following it. And whatever the various other intersections are for those Black women. So for me, it feels like that. Like, how do I create more space for that?
Shout out to Black women.
Always. Shout out to Black women.
What does the future look like? What are you hoping for? You know, yes, I know we spoke about healing, but, like, is there, like, are we gonna have, like, an island where we can just be joyful? Are we gonna have, like, you know, like how people do, like, these music festivals and stuff like that? Like, are we just going to have a space? Like, in South Africa, for instance, there's a book festival called the Abantu Book Festival, solely for Black bodies. And just, like, being there when it was the first Abantu last year was liberating for me, to be in a space of only Black bodies. Like, it was the joy that you're speaking about. Like, you could just exist. And I'm wondering if like, the Black Joy Project will become like that. Like, there will be a gathering of Blackness year in and year out.
Like I said earlier, it's a living entity. So the answer is yes. Why not? It could be, if that's what people want or need. You mean the future of the Black Joy Project? I think it's going to become a number of things. One is going to be a team of people, because I said community works better. And right now, the Black Joy Project is rocking dolo, and that I don't have the capacity to do all of this. So yeah, it's going to become a team. It's going to become a bigger digital platform where I want to create a hub where people can go and learn about or read about or listen to whatever Black Joy means, both in the world and wherever they are. Imagine if you could, like, go on a website and see what was happening in South Africa as in relation to Black Joy.
Yeah. That would be amazing. Just imagine if you needed a joyful day, you just click on and there are these various people around the world.
I think that's the beauty of, now it's been over 2 years of this, like, what's the word? Like, law of attraction. So I've also have all this reciprocation of Black Joy, or meeting people that do this work. I just want to be clear. Kleaver Cruz is not the one who created it, and I'm not the last one. I'm not the first one. I'm not the only one. I'm the one taking on this project and this name, but there's people doing Black Joy shit all over the world. And that ranges from a liberatory Black space in the center of Sao Paulo to, like, a group who had some members of the DC chapter of Black Lives Matter host something called Black Joy Sundays. There's a Black woman in North Carolina with her partner hosting something. They created something called Black Joy Pop-Ups. I could go on and on. What I'm saying is there's a world of Black Joy for real. And it's actually in existence and in motion right now as we speak. And I think what is not there yet is the connector. Like, what is the thing that is bringing all of this together?
Where can we find all these things in one place, right?
Yeah.
They are out there, but we don't know where they are.
And then we don't always name it that, which is fine.
Yeah.
'Cause I think the other thing worth saying is, now I probably have like over 1,000 responses to the question of what does Black joy mean to you from Black people from all over the place. And I have to say that 100% of those interactions, none of this was new.
Yeah.
This was an affirmation. Like language giving, like articulation of a thing that we already understand. But I want to be bold and say that there's not a Black person that does not understand what that means to experience Black joy. It's just that we may not always have the language for it. And like you said, is that many of us are conditioned to believe that we're supposed to exist in the opposite environment. And so even having the audacity to experience it sometimes feels inhibiting. Like we're not allowed to do that.
I'm reminded of an experience of a conversation that I had with one of my friends. I think the morning that I found out that my mom passed away. But I was speaking to her and I was saying to her, as Black bodies, as marginalized bodies, we are afraid to claim the joyful parts of us. So she had asked me like how my grad studies were going in LA, and I literally said to her, I'm afraid to say that I'm doing well and that I'm happy and that I'm joyful here. Because I understood, because of conditioning in my head, that claiming that gave me a sense of power that I thought I didn't have. So I think it's important what you're saying. You're saying it's not even a language, like it's an articulation. It's also an affirmation telling people that it's okay to feel this way.
Right. And that's not a diversion. It's not an alternative to anything. It's a yes and.
Yes.
That yes, I'm fucked up and depressed and I can have experience of joy. You know, if we're talking a micro level, and it's like the world is literally anti-Black. Like that's just facts. Which means that any moment of us creating Black joy is a resistance to that because the basis is our pain. It's death.
Yeah.
It's literally like systems and ways of being that work against us that do not value Blackness. And so for us to imagine or create that in real life, 3D live, is important.
Yeah.
It's very important.
I mean, as you're speaking, I'm reminded of Erica Garner's passing, in the last week. And just like, because of these systems, right? Because of the oppression, right? So it is actually resistance for us to be joyful because these systems weren't created for us to exist in.
And that's there, you know what I'm saying? Like I can't say it enough that this is not new. That's there. That like when you go to demonstrations, and this is true I literally have seen it from South Africa to other parts of the world. There's dancing and there's music and shit at these demonstrations. This is not like everybody's in rows and we're all marching down.
Exactly.
There's literally like Black joy. Not like there is. It's there.
Yeah.
And that's integral to recharge the people that are part of it, that it's disruptive, right? Like, you actually expect us to be these monsters or whatever. And you know what? Maybe we're just going to dance.
Yeah.
And that is a resistance. What I'm saying is that it's not to make light of it. Like, this is a real thing, and it's always there. That when the Black folks that were forced into this part of the world, there's no way they would have made it through that experience without some forms of Black joy. There's no way that if there wasn't those jumping of the brooms, a child being born, even though that was also a source of depression sometimes. There's so many moments of joy that literally was part of the key to get through it, you know?
And I mean, for instance, in South Africa, there are a lot of writings around, like, singing as resistance and what that meant, what type of songs, what type of songs they sang there. And even when we had the recent Fees Must Fall and Roads Must Fall, right? Just the idea of people just constantly singing, calling into name and dancing as a form of being joyful, right? As a form of also resisting the system that thinks we're going to be these militarized people, but we're going to sing. So because we're a literary podcast, obviously it's important to speak about books. I guess let's start this. Who are some of the writers that have changed your life? Let's start there.
That's not a fair question. Oh my God. That is a wild question.
Maybe we can narrow it down. Like, give us like...
Don't give me a number.
Okay.
One of them, because I'm looking at him, is Baldwin. And I think for him, for me, reading about someone who... And someone's had a similar path to me, growing up in uptown New York City. He went to high school in the Bronx. I didn't, but I grew up there. Just something about the ways that he was able to write about Harlem in a way, and New York City in a way that feels universal still, and unfortunately still resonates. And the ways that he lived his life and did what he did are really inspiring to me. I think was just like, bar none, like one of the best writers ever. And I think it's because he was able to make it feel like you were there.
Yeah.
Whenever he wrote something, particularly his non-fiction, and then his lived experience. That guy was a mess. You know what I'm saying? Like he was drinking all over the place, smoking, sleeping with so and so, chasing unrequited love, all these different things. So I think that's important too. That it's not just this like romanticism of his writing, but him as a person. You know, he was a human being who experienced pain and love and all this. So him, Kiese Lehman is one of the writers that he's like a big brother, friend, mentor. A guiding light in a lot of ways, and he is the person who reminded me when I almost lost my dream to be a writer that this is what I want to be doing. So I feel indebted to him in some ways, both as a writer and just again like as a human being that practices the shit that he believes in and makes mistakes out loud and those kind of things. I would also say just so many writers. One really important book to me is called Songs of the Water Saints by Nelly Rosario, and what she does, because I'm a word geek, is she was able to write about Dominicans, like multiple generations of Dominicans, Dominican women in particular, in English in a way that still felt authentic to however it was actually being spoken, which was most likely in Spanish. That she took a translation course to figure out how to properly write what she was hearing in Spanish in English, and the punctuation that went with it is like really amazing. I want to do that for real. Like I'm like, do I take a translation course? So yeah, reading her book felt really affirming to read that story, because something I've been doing, it feels like my whole life, is trying to find the stories that I need, and that my purpose in life, if I were to put it in one sentence, is to tell the stories that did not exist when I needed them the most. And sometimes those stories are written, sometimes they're told, sometimes they're visual. But reading her book was one of those times I felt like I could breathe. Like, whoa, this is a real thing. And reading about Dominicans in English meant a lot, and about history that I understood as well. So shout out to Nelly Rosario. And because it's really the last book I read is fresh in my head. So shout out to Homegoing.
Shout out to Homegoing.
Wow.
Yes.
What a book.
Yeah. What I guess we speaking about Homegoing, which my next question was like, what are like the 3 books from last year that you read and you're like, actually, wowza?
Shit. Homegoing, a show. Wow. That book is great. What's the name of that book? You know, you read so much and then you draw a blank.
Do you remember the plot?
Yeah, it's wait, it's bothering me. I'm gonna get it. Give me 1 second. But the plot of the book is, it takes place in the Philippines, and there's a teenage girl who lives with her mom. It's like a multiple generation family, and the mom has to move to the U.S. And so this experience of the separate, and it's because the thing that like spun the whole story is that her dad gets killed, like he disappeared, and then they find out he was killed. And so this creates like an entire disruption in their family, and so the mom ends up having to move. And I just thought it was a really one, it's incredibly well written, and it told a story of it partly told the story of these women in the 40s that experienced sexual assault and rape during World War II, that I hadn't necessarily heard that story, and I think because it was written in fiction made it a little more powerful than if you just read the story directly, because the way she incorporated it was a part of her family. Like, this was someone in her family that had experienced it. I'm looking for the book. Glorious. Because the book title is actually really awesome. Oh my God.
That's okay. Take your time.
Anyways, we'll move on.
So definitely Homegoing.
Homegoing. Okay, I got it. It's called Ángel de la Luna and the Fifth Glorious Mystery.
And who's the author?
The author is... Jesus. Evelina Galan.
Okay.
She's really great. You should check her out. But basically what I want to highlight is there's something in the U.S. called Voices of Our Nation Arts Foundation, and it's an entity that supports emerging writers of color, and each summer they have a week-long workshop that you could attend in a particular discipline. And so what I did, I participated in it in 2016, last 2 years ago. And so what I did in 2017 is I wanted to read at least one book from each of the instructors.
Oh.
And so Evelina is one of the people that coordinates Vona.
Oh, that's really
And she's a professor at the University of Miami. So yeah, look up Vona and read any of those books written by those authors that instruct those courses.
No, that would be amazing. And then, what are you looking forward to in this 2018? You know, shout out to Happy New Year. What are you looking forward to? As a creator, as a writer?
To continue a commitment I had last year, which was to live a life I've never lived. I have to do things I've never done. And to lean into mystery, to ask for guidance when I need it, because they're there, spiritually and otherwise. I am excited to travel to countries I've never been to, both planned and unplanned.
Shout out to traveling.
Hello. It's important. I gotta be with Black people in the world. And yeah, there's some other things I'm not gonna speak on, but what I will affirm is to do things I've never done, to live a life I've never lived.
I mean, I think that's important because like just hearing it now, it's just like actually do the things I've never done, live a life I've never lived. What a deep affirmation about like, you know, stepping outside of yourself, but also outside of your comfort zone in ways that you couldn't imagine.
And requires imagination, which is one of the most radical things we have as Black people.
And which we don't use often enough because we've been taught that imagination is thinking up things that don't exist, right?
But I think we do. And it's funny, I read something earlier that said like, I don't want to mess it up, but basically it was like alluding to like this idea of a ghetto is a type of creativity until it's discovered by someone else.
Which is true.
Which is an imagining, but for real, that like at the margins of any society, and if we're talking about Black people, wherever we exist, those are actually some of the most imaginative, creative people.
And that reminds me actually of some of the inventions that we have from our family. Like some of the remedies that we have growing up, some of the things that our parents had to do in order to ensure, like, it's just like, even in the hardship, like, we created things, we imagined ourselves, right? So I know a lot of people, like, have these conversations about there are certain foods that they won't ever eat because it reminds them of poverty. I don't necessarily have that food because I feel like in some ways it connects me to, like, my grandmother and my aunt and my mom. It just, it reminds me of, like, oh, this is the one dish that she always made and was so nice, you know?
And that then you can't act brand new, right? Like,
yeah.
This is where I came from, and I cannot forget that.
Thank you very much for coming through, and also just for blessing us with like a different type of conversations, because you know, on the Cheeky Natives we always have these conversations about. So tell us, in line 59, what did you mean when you said this? So also just like, I think it's important as the Cheeky Natives to archive stories about Black bodies, and I think that's so important because that is what the Black Joy Project seeks to do, right? Archiving the stories of Black bodies diasporically in digital, in whatever ways. So shout out to you, right? So we rate, I guess, what people do, and we give people land.
Oh yeah, I listen, I know.
So I mean, I'm not particularly familiar with the Caribbean islands, but I think you deserve an island or some land on the Caribbean. So what part of the Caribbean islands tickles your fancy?
What tickles my fancy is independence and sovereignty for those Black people living in the Caribbean. So I won't take their land. And I guess that's worth naming the indigenous people that are there. But what I will say is I love a good beach. And
obviously honestly, you want warm summers.
Hello. I don't know. It's a tie between... Really, I'm not picky as long as it's a quiet beach somewhere in the Caribbean. So I'm not going to claim any particular island. That's not shade to Dominican Republic. And there's something about the forest in Dominica that is really majestic. Particularly the forest where the boiling lake is. So shout out to Dominica. and may they get all the power and resource that they need to restore that island. But yeah, I'm gonna be that guy and say, like, I actually just want sovereignty and freedom.
That's good, people. Right? That's good. So let's give you sovereignty and freedom. I mean, we had someone on the podcast a couple of weeks to be like, I just want the world to be an island that fights patriarchy.
Hello.
And I was like, yeah, that's true. Like, we need to start even reimagining what that means, like what taking ownership of land actually means.
But then I might also say, and I would take land from whoever I need to, particularly the people in power in this city, to have a brownstone that my mom, my grandma, and my brother and my family can live in
actually, before we go, I wanted to talk, now that you reminded me, about the relationship that I've met both your grandmother and your mom, and incredible Black women. Shout out to them. Do you want to, like, just briefly tell us about the relationship that you have with them, like each of these Black women?
Before I had mirrors, they were my reflection. So those are the women, the people that show me a lot of things and ways of being. They don't necessarily use words like feminist and that kind of thing, but totally are the ones who taught, literally, like, raising me, and Walter is saying, you have to learn how to cook and clean and these kinds of things because you can't depend on a woman to do that for you.
And not derating women, but saying that you're a person. Like, you must take care of your own.
If you're out here worrying about if somebody else is going to cook for you, you could starve. Because what if that person says no?
That is true.
You know?
Listen to all men.
Hello. They're also the ones, particularly my mom, was the one who taught me that you do good because it's the right thing to do. And that whenever you can offer support or help, that you do that because you can. And not because you're going to get an award or you need to pat yourself on the back or that kind of thing, but that actually you do right. And that's not always going to be the right time. Like, it's not going to be this is a volunteer opportunity, but, like, if a woman is being harassed by a man on the street, are you going to step in? If a little kid is lost in a store, are you going to be the one to help them? So she taught me a lot about doing right and to take risk and to trust, to have faith. My mom was really young. She was 18, almost 18, when she had me and Walter. And sometimes I'm in awe of the decisions that she was able to make, and the types of faith she had to have for some of the things that Walter and I experienced.
The imagining.
In the name of doing better, right? Of, like, I couldn't imagine as, like, a 20-something or 30-something with the only 2 kids I have saying, yes, my 2 children can leave and go live in some other state that's 5 hours away at the closest. Things like that they have just taught me a lot about. And community, I guess. My mom is the one who always used to talk about the village, and I never knew what she was talking about until Walter graduated from college, and literally the village was there. And I remember stepping back like, this is what she's been talking about all these years. All these people are here. So she taught me about the power of community, which you must have to learn as a young mother, that you can't do it all. A group of people will have to help you through this. So yeah, shout out to them.
And how can people follow your work and follow the Black Joy Project? How can people tap into the Black Joy Project?
Sure. So the Black Joy Project, if you are a fan of Instagram, you can go to @the Black Joy Project. THE is important. People skip that. And it's also on Facebook. So facebook.com/the Black Joy Project. If you want to read some of my writing, it's really simple. kleavercruz.com.
How do you spell Kleaver?
Sure. It's K-L-E as in Eric, A as in Apple, V as in Victor, E as in Eric, R. And then Cruz is C as in cat, R-U-Z or Z, depending on where you learn the alphabet.
Okay, cool. So thank you again, Kleaver Cruz, for joining us on the Cheeky Natives.
Thank you for having me.
We wish you all the best, and we hope that we as the Cheeky Natives can get involved in the Black Joy Project, in reimagining Blackness, in healing, in celebrating Blackness.
Thank you. Can I say one more thing?
Yes.
I just want to thank and give a shout out to Darnell Walker, who right at the end of 2016, I learned about something called Baldwin's Room, which was a residency that he had set up for Black Americans. And that allowed me to spend 2 weeks in South Africa at the beginning of 2017. That really changed my life. So shout out to South Africa.
For changing your life.
Shout out to the motherfucking Black people in South Africa who taught me so much. and really welcomed me in a way that I wasn't expecting necessarily. So knowing that the love is deeply appreciated, and I hope to reciprocate it.
You have. Just, you have. So thank you again, Kleaver. Again, like I said, thank you very much for joining us, and continue to do the work that you're doing. We see you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.